Welcome, everyone. Thanks for letting us know. Thanks for letting us know where you're listening to us from. But please continue to share your locations, if you will. It's great to see so many people here tonight.
From all over.
Yeah. So I think
lots of Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. I guess it's a better time it's also a good time on the West Coast. We're seeing a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's Maine, Pittsburgh.
We heard from a lot of our European and British followers that this is not a great time for them.
Yeah,
so
right.
Apologies.
Yeah.
They can listen to the recording, however.
That's right. That's right. Okay, maybe we should get started. So hi, everybody. My name's Inga Brody. I'm joined tonight with my fellow hosts, Susan Allen Ford and Deb Barnum. Our technical director is Maisie Ferguson, keeps everything running smoothly for us. This is the third episode in our 2026 series on Austen's unsung characters, minor characters from her novels who perhaps haven't received as much attention as they should. We began in January with a talk by Brenda Cox, who gave us a comprehensive look at Jane Austen's relationship to the Church of England, and also her clergyman characters, especially her most maybe beloved, maybe at least ludicrous clergyman, Mr. Collins. I guess we love Mr. Tilney too. The following event featured Natasha Duquette, who focused on the contemplative Eleanor Tilney, and we were introduced to the inner world of this elegant and attractive character from Persuasion.
If you missed those or any other, as Deb indicated, you can watch those episodes for free on our website, janeaustenandco.org. And we are proud to keep Jane Austen and Company freely available to the entire world as a pay-what-you-want ticketed experience. So if you enjoy our programming, we really appreciate any donations that you can make.
So today we continue the Unsung Characters series with our third episode, focusing on Nurse Rooke and Mrs. Smith from Persuasion. We are so excited to have Katherine Koller with us this evening to tell us why we should pay more attention to these unsung characters.
And a little bit about Katherine. Katherine Koller's first plays, love this title, Cowboy Boots in a Corsage and Magpie, aired on CBC Radio. Stage plays include Alberta Landworks trilogy Coal Valley, The Making of a Miner, which performed at Royal Tyrrell Museum, The Seed Savers, and Alberta Playwriting Competition winner, Last Chance Leduc. Riverkeeper was a finalist in the Alberta Playwriting Competition. Recent audio plays are also Hope Soup with Edmonton Fringe and The Percussionist with music by George Kohler, Script Salon. Katherine's many books include Voices of the Land, The Seed Savers and Other Plays, a novel called Art Lessons, which was finalist for the Edmonton Book Prize and the Alberta Reader's Choice Award, and Winning Chance Stories, which won a High Plains Book Award and the Exporting Alberta Award. The second collection of short stories, Earthen, is coming up very soon in May 2026. Katherine Koller is a former associate lecturer at the University of Alberta, founding producer of Edmonton Script Salon, a monthly new play reading series, now in its 12th year, like Jane Austen's summer program. And she's been a member of the Citadel Playwrights Lab, where she helped write an adaptation of Persuasion to be performed in November 2026 at Concordia University of Edmonton.
Before Katherine begins, our technical director, Maisie, is going to explain how you can send in questions during and after their performance.
Hello everyone and welcome to YouTube, our streaming platform. If you'd like to leave a comment or ask a question, please use the comment feature on the sidebar. We'll collect your comments throughout the performance, and then during the Q&A afterward, we will ask Katherine and she'll answer them. So please get those questions and comments in because we love to hear from you. You will need to log into your Google or YouTube account to post using the comment feature on the sidebar. If you do not have a YouTube or Google account, that is perfectly fine. You can submit your questions to our email, info@janeaustenandco.org. We'll collect questions there as well and ask them for you.
So, without further ado, we present That Elasticity of Mind, Mrs. Smith and Nurse Rooke in Persuasion.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited to share what I've learned in the adaptation of this exceptional novel by Jane Austen, my favorite, Persuasion. So in my outline, I'm going to talk a little bit about my choices that I had to make in adapting Persuasion for the stage. We're going to do a little bit of close reading of some excerpts about Mrs. Smith and Nurse Rooke from the novel. And interspersed with those, we're going to have a look at some stills from the film adaptations that feature Mrs. Smith and Nurse Rooke. And finally, we're going to have a screening of the scene, Act 2, Scene 4, from my adaptation of Persuasion for everyone to see. And then I will take questions. So let's begin. For this play, for this version of Persuasion, I wrote a synopsis that I'm going to read out just so you can get an idea of what I was after. Anne Elliot, 27, cannot forget her first attachment and ruptured engagement to Frederick Wentworth almost 8 years before. Now a captain in the English Navy, her beloved returns triumphant over the defeat of Napoleon, looking for marriage with anyone but her. The estranged former lovers find themselves in constant close company, excluded, injured, and pressured by others, or separated and disturbed until both hearts are finally opened, understood, and rejoined for all time. In Persuasion, adapted from the last novel by Jane Austen, in celebration of the 250th anniversary of her birth, anything is possible then and now, from season to season. Love, like friendship, can be lost and found again. So that was what I wrote for the festival presentation of this play, a reading that we did in 2025. And I just want to step back a bit. I pitched the idea of adapting Persuasion to our major theater here in Edmonton, the Citadel, in 2022. I first pitched it in 2022. This was after seeing the Netflix version. And I got a no back that year, but the next year, 2023, I tried again, and that year they happened to be looking specifically for adaptations. And this time they said yes. So for me, I got a second chance, just like Anne. There was something happening here. I was really, really excited. The directives that I had from the theater were these: to write an adaptation for a 660-seat proscenium theater, to fill the space with story, that the adaptation should have school appeal, therefore PG, and also include an element of spectacle. The element that I chose for this play is music. Finally, the last directive was I could have 10 cast members. Now, for a playwright in Canada, used to very small stages, normally were asked to write for 4 cast or less. So to write for 10 was an absolute challenge and exciting thing for me. So the first thing I had to do was figure out what is the hook that will get over 600 people into the theater per performance. And you might want to write in the chat what you think the hook is of this novel. For me, it's contained in that synopsis. For me, it was love lost and regained. I felt that was something that anyone could understand. How many of us in our romantic relationships have felt that we've lost love, even for 5 minutes, or for a day, or in Anne's case, 8 years. Then the next thing I had to do was I had to kind of refine the story down under that spine that I have, love, lost, and regained. I refined the story down to 5 beats. We call them beats in dramatic terms. So here they are. This is what I got. She loves him even when he's gone. She loves him even when he courts others. She loves him and helps him when his intended is hurt. She pursues him when he is free, just as she is pursued. And she invites him to reissue his offer and accepts it. Notice that each of my beats start with she. That's Anne. To me, Anne in this novel is active. She has agency and she grows. So next, I had to decide who were going to be the characters in this play. I had 10 actors, remember. So at the top of the list are the 2 leads. So they stay who they are all the way through the play. That was for sure. I had to do that. But then I had 8 more bodies that I could fill with character. And you can see that I have left out some of the characters in the novel. And you might want to put in the chat which ones those are. A hint, I deleted 8 characters. But what I decided to do here was to choose 2 characters per actor, and that those characters were almost opposites. This is a really fun challenge for actors. They love this kind of ability to go from one end to the other. So for example, here I'm going to just point out Lady Russell was doubled with Nurse Rooke. So Lady Russell, the woman who's got everything and is living off the legacy of her knighted husband, but who's also a widow. And then Nurse Rooke, also supposed, I think she's a widow. She's called Mrs. Rooke. We don't hear anything about her husband. And she's living off her own skills. She is part of that new meritocracy that is doing her own work. She's not in servitude. She's doing her own her own work for her own clients. So the other one I wanted to point out was Mary, Anne's younger sister, and she is doubled with Mrs. Smith. So the same actor who plays Mary plays Mrs. Smith. Mary, the one who thinks she's always sick, and Mrs. Smith, the one who is ill at this time. So I thought that would be a lot of fun, and it sort of laid out for me quite easily. Next, I wanted to look at the setting, and I had to decide, the book is arranged in 2 groups of 12 chapters each. I looked at that and I thought, no, I think that was just maybe a printer decision. I don't think that would be how I can arrange these two acts. In the end, it was quite clear to me and my dramaturg that the first act had to be in Somerset and Lyme, and that the second act had to be entirely in Bath. And that gave us the opportunity to have an act break and change the set. And also there is that break in timing too. We've got fall in the first act and the winter in the second. So that was that became apparent very quickly. When I'm looking at the inspirations and the challenges of doing this, I must say that in the first year of developing the play, I was absolutely terrified to be working with Jane Austen's genius. But in the second year of working on this, it was an absolute joy. I was really lucky because our time in the lab was extended. And so I had a second year of development culminating in this Collider Festival reading. But going back to the beginning of my list there, I should go in order. But the past adaptations actually were what challenged me. The authorship of those past adaptations, when I researched, I found they were all written by men. The one exception is the 2022 version, 2022 version, which is written by a man and a woman writing team. So, source fidelity was another thing that really inspired me. I just felt that I felt the novel wasn't completely not as Jane would have wanted it. So that was the other thing. The challenges here were that this novel has the least amount of dialogue of all of them. And of course, another challenge, even with that dialogue, was having to, as my dramaturg said, blow the dust off of it. So that was another challenge. I was inspired by a trip to England in the summer between those 2 years of development. I went with the Jasna tour. It was an awesome trip. I got to see all the places I was writing about. And I mentioned the second year of development, right? And then the other thing that really inspired me were these oppositional forces. And here I invite you to add any more that you can think of in the chat. I wrote quite a list down here, and I'm not going to read them all. But there are these opposites, which occur sometimes right in the same sentence of Jane Austen's work. And I think this is what, for me, makes the text, the original source text, shimmer with life, aliveness, and with wit. Because we have this back and forth, up and down, vertical, horizontal, in and out, all these dimensions talked about within the text. And that was very exciting to me as a playwright. The other thing that was exciting to me was how dialogue is used in the novel. There's not very much of it, I just mentioned, and there's no ball, notice that. I felt, for me, that Anne and Wentworth, when they're speaking to others, they're actually speaking to each other. They want each other to hear what they're saying to the rest around them. And that causes a kind of dramatic tension that really excited me. The overheard dialogues that we have in this novel between Wentworth and Louisa, the nut analogy, a scene that's overheard by Anne. And then, of course, the great debate at the end of the novel between Anne and Harville, overheard by Wentworth. These were really exciting to me. In the novel, I had to sort of take some of the thought work that was in Anne's head, and I had to take that out of her interior into the exterior, so that what is unsaid, what is thought, becomes said, and therefore what is unseen can be seen. This is something that the stage can do. We can read the body language of the actors and we can get it right away. So this made all of it very, very exciting to me. Then when it came to Mrs. Smith, I found that she was a catalyst in the novel in both securing Anne's constancy to Wentworth, because she prompts Anne to talk about Wentworth. She doesn't mention his name, of course, but Anne does volunteer Wentworth to help Mrs. Smith in her financial troubles. And I thought that was really something, that at that point, Anne was confident enough to know that he would help her just as Anne helped him with Louisa. That made me think again that Mrs. Smith would have a hand, I would say, in getting them completely back together. So that was something I was really interested in. Next, I think we have our first still. Now, before this 1971 BBC version, there was one done, a British serial done in the 1960s, but the footage has all been lost, so we don't know much about it, except for the cast list does include Mrs. Smith. I found that interesting. In this one, the 1971 version, the dialogue reads from Nurse Rooke, who appears for about 15 seconds total. Well, Miss Elliot, we weren't expecting you. And in the next one, we have a look at Mrs. Smith and Nurse Rooke, and they're saying to Anne, I can see it in your eye. Oh, yes. So that little moment is preserved in that version. Now, getting back to Nurse Rooke, no one in particular. This is Mrs. Smith speaking to Anne. Did you observe the woman who opened the door to you when you called yesterday? No. Was it not Mrs. Speed, as usual, or the maid? I observed no one in particular. It was my friend, Mrs. Rooke, Nurse Rooke, who, by the by, had a great curiosity to see you and was delighted to be in the way to let you in. And she it was who told me you were to marry Mr. Elliot. She had had it from Mrs. Wallace herself, which did not seem bad authority. She sat an hour with me on Monday evening and gave me the whole history. The whole history, repeated Anne, laughing. She could not make a very long history, I think, of one such little article of unfounded news. So here I want to point out that Nurse Rooke, this very unsung minor character, is illuminating Anne. She is telling us something about Anne. Here's Anne, who was, we've heard earlier in the novel, who was a nobody. She was only Anne. Anne does not notice Nurse Rooke. So here she's kind of at fault, I would think, but it is also true that Anne, at this point in time, right after the concert, is in a cloud of wonder. She, from the moment she sees Wentworth at the beginning, before the concert, she can't look at anything else, and she can't even properly answer Mrs. Smith's questions about who was there because she only had eyes for him. She doesn't even really pay attention or appear to pay attention to Elliot's comment, which is kind of like a pre-proposal, right? The name of Anne Elliot has long had an interesting sound to me. If I dared, I would breathe my wishes that the name might never change. She doesn't actually react to it. Her eyes are only on Wentworth, and it's not till the next page of the novel that Anne actually begins to be distressed by Mr. Elliot and wished him no longer near her. Let's go to the next slide about Anne. She's going to protest about Mrs. Rooke's gossip. We must not expect to get real information in such a line. Facts or opinions, which are to pass through the hands of so many, to be misconceived by folly in one and ignorance in another, can hardly have much truth left. So I find it interesting in this novel, we hear the contrast between the spoken word or gossip compared with the written word or the letter. There are so many important letters in this novel. I actually begin my play with a letter, and the first scene is her letter, the last scene is his letter. So the written word at this time, I think we can say, contained more authority. And so we can look at that letter of Wentworth and believe it to be entirely sincere, just as we can read with Anne the letter of Mr. Elliot and believe that that is entirely sincere. So in the case of Mr. Elliot, gossip kind of elevates him, but what he has written himself with his own hand degrades him. That comment about the hand, too, is important because we have that line in the great debate about the pens, that the pen has been in the hands of men. So what one does with that pen is really, really important. Okay, I'm going to go on now to Nurse Rooke's identity, as said by Mrs. Smith. Nurse Rooke thoroughly understands when to speak. She is a shrewd, intelligent, sensible woman. Hers is a line to seeing human nature, and she has a fund of good sense and observation, which, as a companion, make her infinitely superior to the thousands of those who have, having only received the best education in the world, know nothing worth attending to. Call it gossip if you will, but when Nurse Rooke has half an hour's leisure to bestow on me, she is sure to have something to relate that is entertaining and profitable, something that makes one know one's species better. One likes to hear what is going on, to be au fait as to the newest modes of being trifling and silly. To me, who live so much alone, her conversation, I assure you, is a treat. Lots of things in this sort of character analysis of Nurse Rooke. One of the things I'm noticing is, when to speak. That is, when to watch, when to listen, and when to speak. This is something that Nurse Rooke seems to have achieved. There's the sense of reciprocity in here, bestowing the hour on her friend and receiving the gossip. That reciprocity comes up over and over again. You can imagine in this play with all these opposites going on. The other thing I notice here are these absolutes, which sometimes are one of the ways Jane Austen laughs, because nothing can be absolute. But look at the words thoroughly, infinitely superior, the newest modes. Those kinds of words I'm always interested to see, because they're jabbing words. They're jabbing at the person who's being spoken of and also the one who speaks them. I'm also reminded of Anne's line to Mr. Elliot previously. My idea of good company, Mr. Elliot, is the company of clever, well-informed people who have a great deal of conversation. So in Mrs. Smith's mind, Nurse Rooke does fill that need. Notice that Rooke, the name Rooke, is from, I think, a crow, which might be someone who could tell secrets. Yet also rook is the castle in the game of chess. So I find that the choice of the word is also really interesting. Nurse Rooke pays her own way by her profession. She's not in servitude, as I mentioned, but she is a part of this new meritocracy, which also elevates men without legacy, like Wentworth. I'm going to move on to Anne a little bit here next. And Anne says about Nurse Rooke, and here is again Anne revealing herself through these minor characters. She says, women of that class have great opportunities, and if they are intelligent, may be well worth listening to. And then later on, when asking about the late Mrs. Elliot, she says, but was she not a very low woman? So here, when Anne has talked about herself being too proud to enjoy a welcome from the Dalrymples that depends so entirely on rank, here she is ranking herself above both the late Mrs. Elliot and Nurse Rooke. So I love how Jane Austen does this. Depending on which way the rank goes, she will, be influenced or not. Just like Anne's sister Elizabeth and her father, who find it more difficult to do the flattering when no one else is flattering them. That's after Mrs. Clay has left the premises. Going on to the next quote here, what instances must pass before them of ardent, disinterested, self-denying attachment, of heroism, fortitude, patience, resignation, of all the conflicts and all the sacrifices that ennoble us more. A sick chamber may often furnish the worth of volumes. So here's Anne again talking about Nurse Rooke and kind of going a little overboard. Look at those absolute words that ennoble us more, and then look at that word worth again. We've heard this one before. On top of all this, we know that Anne knows full well from her sister Mary and from little Charles that this sick chamber, and even from maybe Louisa, that the sick chamber is far from heroism, fortitude, etc. Anne is performing a little bit here, and perhaps this is actually Jane laughing at herself because she was very sick at the time of writing this novel. So that's another thing I noticed. And then I'd like to show you some more stills now from the 1995 version. This is Mrs. Smith saying, "How can I be melancholy when you are come to visit?" Speaking to Anne. And next we have Anne saying to this character, Nurse Rooke, "So you're a spy, Nurse Rooke." So interesting how gossip has now become spy in that version. Next, I want to go to the one reported line of Nurse Rooke from the whole novel. This is Mrs. Smith speaking. "Mrs. Wallace has an amusing idea, as nurse tells me, that it is to be put into the marriage articles when you and Mr. Elliot marry, that your father is not to marry Mrs. Clay. But my sensible Nurse Rooke sees the absurdity of it. 'Why, to be sure, ma'am,' said she, 'it would not prevent his marrying anybody else.' And indeed, to own the truth, I do not think nurse in her heart is a very strenuous opposer of Sir Walter's making a second match. She must be allowed to be a favorer of matrimony, you know, and since self will intrude, who can say that she may not have some flying visions of attending the next Lady Elliot through Mrs. Wallace's recommendation? So I'll just challenge you to listen for that line in my scene, because I decided to preserve it. I thought it was an important one. And I wanted to point out here the little underlined bit, since self will intrude. So Mrs. Smith is aware that Nurse Rooke has to look out for her own living, so she has to find the next client, the next patient. And Jane Austen uses this parenthetical phrase, since self will intrude, which I think is so telling. And we hear it actually a little bit later, I think it is. It's in the same chapter. Anne says, when she's worried about what Mr. Elliot must have, where Mr. Elliot had heard of her from before, and she learns that it's actually from Mrs. Smith. And she says, what wild imaginations one forms when dear self is concerned. Even Anne, genteel Anne, is very concerned about her own reputation. I'm going to move on now to the next slide, Mrs. Smith. So this is kind of Anne's assessment of Mrs. Smith through the narrator. Anne prized the frank, the open-hearted, the eager character beyond all others. Warmth and enthusiasm did captivate her still. She felt that she could so much more depend upon the sincerity of those who sometimes looked or said a careless or hasty thing than of those whose presence of mind never varied, whose tongue never slipped. Yeah, no, I think here the narrator is comparing Mr. Elliot and Captain Wentworth, but this also refers to Mrs. Smith, who from the second visit with Anne talked with great openness. So Anne thinks, from this point that Mr. Elliot is not open-hearted, eager, doesn't have that warmth and enthusiasm or that sincerity. This is what she's talking about. And she's always comparing him to Captain Wentworth. But this idea of the tongue slipping really interested me. We see Mrs. Smith's tongue slip when she reveals that she did in fact talk about Anne to Mr. Elliot and compared Anne as superior to her sister Elizabeth. So her tongue kind of slips there because although it's a compliment to Anne, it's not one to Elizabeth. But here's the bigger one. Mrs. Smith reverses from commending Mr. Elliot at the beginning of her scene that I'll show you, to ending up with this damning monologue, which ends with, he is hollow and black at heart. Even at the beginning, though, there are signs that Mrs. Smith is giving away in kind of a slip of tongue. She says, let me plead for she's talking about Mr. Elliot here, let me plead for my present friend, I cannot call him, but for my former friend. So already we have her kind of losing that grip of enthusiasm for someone she despises. I call that a slip of the tongue. I think Anne's slipping as well when she uses the terms low woman and woman of that class. I'm going to go on to the next little bit there. No, sorry, just the same slide. Yeah. Mrs. Smith had shown Anne kindness, had been useful and good to her in a way which had considerably lessened her misery, and could never be remembered with indifference. She was a widow and poor, with severe rheumatic fever, which, finally settling in her legs, had made her for the present a cripple, living in a very humble way, unable even to afford herself the comfort of a servant, and of course almost excluded from society. Interesting how that ends. The comfort of a servant. Nurse Rooke is not a servant. Nurse Rooke, over and over, is mentioned as a friend. And through Nurse Rooke, she is not excluded from society, and through Anne as well. Excuse me for all the ellipses I used out of just to try and shorten this up. But we see the sort of opposite rise of Anne from the silent, unformed girl of 15 when she first knew Mrs. Smith to the elegant little woman she is now. And then we see Mrs. Smith's descent from the health and confidence of superiority when she was first a friend of Anne's to this poor, infirm, helpless widow. This idea of how fortunes can change between the characters, Anne is well aware how that can happen. She's seen it in her own family, and of course, she's seen it in her beloved Wentworth. But amid all that change, we see that Anne continues to be loyal, and her constancy, not only to Wentworth, but is also revealed by Mrs. Smith. Now I'm going to show you the next version, the 2007 version of Persuasion. In this scene, we have Mrs. Smith saying, "This is my nurse, Mrs. Rooke." And in the next one, we have, this is Mrs. Smith saying, "Nothing happens in Bath without Nurse Rooke hearing of it." But this is the one that's most perplexing to me of all. The next slide is Mrs. Smith chasing Anne up the street when she is supposed to be crippled for the moment. And here is where, this is, Anne is already chasing after Wentworth to find him. But here, this is when Mrs. Smith chooses in this version to say, "Mr. Elliot is sincere as far as it goes, but it has not prevented him from courting Mrs. Clay at the same time." So that is how the blackness of heart of Mr. Elliot is given in this version. Okay, we've got just a little bit left here. The next slide, we're seeing Anne inspired by Mrs. Smith. Yet in spite of all this, Anne had reason to believe that Mrs. Smith had moments only of languor and depression to hours of occupation and enjoyment. Here was that elasticity of mind, that disposition to be comforted, that power of turning readily from evil to good, and of finding employment which carried her out of herself, which was from nature alone. It was the choicest gift of heaven, designed to counterbalance every other want. Pretty high praise, pretty high praise. Look at the motif of time, the hour and moments. Time is marked so many times in this novel. The opposites that you see there as well. And Anne, as a reader of others, as she is here, she watched, observed, reflected, and finally determined that this was not a case of fortitude or of resignation only. She believes that this is the character within Mrs. Smith, that elasticity, which is the opposite of firmness. It's more like resilience, isn't it? And we have nature and heaven as the two givers of gifts. Balance, which is the integral point here. There is evil in the world, but there is also good. Notice it right there in the sentence. This is the shimmer that I see in the text, which gives it that aliveness, that verisimilitude, I guess you would want to say, and also the dramatic tension, which I love. So balance comes from resilience, steadiness, and exertion, getting out of yourself and doing something for others. Anne is completely inspired by Mrs. Smith's cheerful constancy. The turn from evil to good, which is one of the central motifs of the novel, comes from this authenticity, this sense of futurity, of healing, of hope, and constancy. Anne says after her meeting with Mrs. Smith had been able to tell her what no one else could have done. And to me, I think only a friend could have provided this evidence about Mr. Elliot. It takes Mrs. Smith a long time to get to that point, but I think we're all cheering for her when she finally does. I think Mrs. Smith promotes this sense of reciprocity in Anne, and I mentioned this before, when Anne volunteers the services of Wentworth. I think it shows Anne's confidence that she and Wentworth will be somehow united, if not as lovers, at least as friends. But we're pretty sure by this point that she knows that he loves her. She gets this because of the fact that he seems to be so jealous of Mr. Elliot. I think this scene with Mrs. Smith shows Anne's growth in the recognition of a real friend, because she has only one other friend, she tells us, and that's Lady Russell, who's actually kind of betrayed her in the past. So this, I think, is really, really important in the novel. The next little quote here: the non-engagement of Anne to Mr. Elliot, while it took from Mrs. Smith the new formed hope of succeeding in the object of her first anxiety, left her at least the comfort of telling the whole story in her own way. That is huge, I think, that Mrs. Smith is able to tell the story in her own way. Yes, it's not written down. Well, it is meta by Jane Austen, but it's her story. And I think this inspires Anne when she goes into the scene, the debate scene with Harville, because that's when she tells her story her own way. She uses her own agency to declare how she feels, and in so doing invites the reproposal from Wentworth. And we also know that, Anne is the one we hear from the most. We're in her head for most of this novel. And she does acknowledge it was just possible that she might have been persuaded by Lady Russell and induced to marry Mr. Elliot. So she's very thankful for this evidence that obviously she cannot. Later in the novel, the narrator tells us Mr. Elliot wanted to animate her curiosity again, but the charm was broken. And the narrator goes into Mr. Elliot's head for a moment, and Mr. Elliot perceives that something has changed here. And he little surmised that how and where he could have heard Anne formally praised was a subject acting now exactly against his interest, bringing immediately to her thoughts all those parts of his conduct which were the least excusable. So these add up to the debate scene. Anne can say what no one else can say. She can tell her story, even though the pen has always been in the hands of men. She's inspired by Mrs. Smith's openness, her constancy, her urgency, and also, I think, a bit by an awareness of Wentworth's competitive nature. We know he's jealous of Mr. Elliot, and so a debate is the perfect frame for her to display her feelings and thoughts and invite him to propose to her again, even as he holds that invitation from her sister at the desk. Okay, so we're going to end up with just a little bit about how Mrs. Smith perhaps inspires Wentworth. Mrs. Smith's recent good offices by Anne had been enough in themselves and their marriage. Instead of depriving her of one friend, secured her two. She was their earliest visitor in their settled life, and Captain Wentworth, by putting her in the way of recovering her husband's property in the West Indies, by writing for her, acting for her, and seeing her through all the petty difficulties of the case with the activity and exertion of a fearless man and a determined friend, fully requited the services which she had rendered, or ever meant to render, his wife. I want to note that the word friend appears 5 times in the last 2 paragraphs of the novel, and Mrs. Smith occupies much of those last 3 paragraphs as well. We see Wentworth transformed back to what he was before, fearless and determined, returning him to that original confident self. We've got Mrs. Smith, might have been absolutely rich and perfectly healthy and yet be happy. And I look at that and I think how Jane must admire Mrs. Smith, because Jane at this time was not rich nor healthy. And, you know, here's that sort of backlash of Jane Austen. It's kind of a swat to those who do not have the character to go with their worldly gifts of health and happiness. We have the last still to show. This is from the 2022 version of Persuasion. And here Anne says, perfect, as the wine falls on her head. This version does not contain Mrs. Smith nor Nurse Rooke, but does feature the Dalrymples. So now I'm going to set up the what you're going to see next. This is Act 2, so you know we're in Bath. Scene 4, this is with Mrs. Smith. In the novel, this happens the morning after the concert, and we have Anne walking down from Camden Place to see Mrs. Smith in Westgate Buildings with high-wrought love and eternal constancy for Wentworth, believing that her affection would be his forever. And if that's not enough, her feelings were enough to spread purification and perfume all the way. We have Jane Austen laughing at Anne in her romantic exaggeration. Now, in my play, this scene comes right after the concert. And at the end of that previous scene, Wentworth exits as Mr. Elliot asks Anne to take his arm back to her seat. And she replies, no, not on this occasion, no. Her eyes are only on Wentworth. And instead, Mrs. Clay takes Mr. Elliot's arm, saying, if you would be so kind. So I want to tell you that what you're about to see is a staged reading. That means the actors have scripts and music stands. They've had minimal rehearsal, I think about an hour, hour and a half. And they are wearing just a suggestion of costume. I hope you enjoy. We'll have questions after.
Oh, Mrs. Smith, I won't be long. Just a little tidy up before Miss Anne arrives. Oh, at her age, she is the lucky one. She will become a lady, and you are her oldest friend. Such visits you will have in future, and in London, no less. I hope when the time comes that you will recommend me to her. I would be very pleased to attend all her confinements. So I do favor matrimony. Ah, Miss Anne, you're here already. We have it on many accounts that you deserve all our best wishes.
Nurse Rooke, whatever do you mean?
My sister, who is landlady here, has heard through the shortcut of a laundress and a waiter at the concert about a very eligible young man who is quite in love with you.
What have you heard?
Besides your friend, Mrs. Smith, I also attend the Dalrymples. Well, sickness knows no bounds, does it?
What does the Viscountess say?
Her observation last night, as I gathered from behind her broad back, was that you have received a proposal from Mr. Elliot.
That man appears at any hour of the day, and I am rudely early this morning to avoid him or any talk of him at all.
I see.
Anne, well, I wasn't sure you could visit today because of your news.
Mrs. Smith,
Let me say, before anything else, that I recommend Mr. Elliot. Where can you find a more gentlemanlike, agreeable man? You are entirely safe in his character. Now, what have I missed?
Oh, nothing. We have talked it all over, beginning to end.
There is nothing to say.
Oh, no? Then what do I see in your eye?
What can you possibly see?
The person who means more to you than the whole world. Do you see it, nurse?
I see something.
In your profession, you must do the best. Such resilience, like in my friend.
Oh, look at the knitting she does now.
Nurse Rooke taught me, as soon as I could use my hands again. And she sells my scarves to her other patients. When they escape pain, they open their heart.
And their pockets. Up for you to give to charity.
You have always considered others.
There are many much worse off than me.
Oh, in every way.
There's so little real friendship in the world.
In the sick room, most often it's weakness and selfishness and impatience.
I confess I have witnessed it.
I keep my judgments to myself, but it pays to have my eyes and ears open. I like to bring some of the goings-on in the world, the silly and trifling, to Mrs. Smith.
Don't we all like a laugh? And wish to learn more about our species?
Yes, but I hope not by gossip.
My dear Anne, when all is settled, I have a request for Mr. Elliot.
Although I'm obliged to consider that man with respect, how do you both imagine I am to marry someone who is nothing to me?
The match is highly beneficial to your entire family.
He pays you constant attention.
He should not. His wife has not been dead half a year.
God rest her.
I assure you, his intentions are unwelcome. Their evils are incalculable.
Oh, then what we see in your eye is another?
Yes, there is somebody. Well, there is always somebody.
And that somebody is?
Everything.
And if not, you have the means to live without any match at all. Your peace will not be shipwrecked, like mine.
Oh, dear.
Or the late Mrs. Elliot.
You knew her.
And Mr. Elliot, before he married. He was like a brother to my late husband. That friendship is quite worn out now. I have been at a loss about what to do. The smooth surface of a family reunion may be valued even if nothing durable lay beneath. But before you might change your mind about Mr. Elliot, you must know the truth. He is without conscience, a designing, cold-blooded being with no feeling for the poor wife who loved him till her death. He is hollow, with no heart.
You knew him then, when he broke with my father and sister?
He desired immediate independence, and instead of your sister, married an heiress.
Was she not a very low woman?
Despite her birth, she was well educated.
We thought it was a love match.
On her part, it was. Money. Money was all he wanted.
When you knew Mr. Elliot, did you ever mention me to him?
I did. Very often. I vouched that you were completely different from your sister.
So that is how he heard of me. He must not realize that you are the school friend I visited in Bath.
He would not recognize me now, or care.
But this is addressed to your husband.
Mr. Elliot said baronetcies can be bought, and the honor of your family was worth dirt. You have my permission to read the letter. In this case, it is no dishonor. You need proof for your family.
Give me joy. I have gotten rid of Sir Walter and Miss Elliot. I wish I had any name but Elliot. I am sick of it. The name of my uncle Walter I can drop, thank God. For the rest of my life, I am yours truly, William Elliot. Sick of his own name. Such artifice toward my father now. Why repair the past rift with us, whatever is his object?
By marrying you, he thinks that his privileged watchfulness as the son-in-law would keep Sir Walter single. He is afraid that Mrs. Clay will wed your father, produce a male heir, and cut his straight line to the Elliot estate.
Lady Russell does not believe my father is in danger from Mrs. Clay.
That does not prevent him marrying someone else.
Mr. Elliot, having spent all of his wife's money, pins his future happiness on an inheritance. He will do whatever it takes.
I have no desire to speak to my cousin. But what may I ask him as his relation on your behalf?
As executor of my late husband's will, Mr. Elliot has deserted me without the smallest compunction. He has neglected to recover funds owed to me in the West Indies, and I am unable to investigate the matter.
I know someone to help you who has been to the West Indies.
What help in a friend?
I must divest myself of this property as soon as possible. It could mean everything.
And this is why you at first felt you must recommend Mr. Elliot to me, even give him praise. But knowing what you know, how could you both believe that I could ever be happy with him?
We thought a promise had already been made. They say Mr. Elliot is on his way to London for your ring.
I felt that with such a fine woman as you, it might not be hopeless.
But he treated his wife badly.
She was wretched. He never loved her. He can't love anyone but himself.
I must ask for liberty to relay this to Lady Russell. She must be undeceived at once.
Please do.
Dear Ed.
Your friend is exhausted. Let me help you.
I'll return soon, I promise.
When I returned late last night, the porter said that your sister Mary and her party had arrived at the White Hart Inn. It's just around the corner.
Thank you, Nurse Rooke. I will go to them first.
Inga, your sound is off.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was a delight, and what a pleasure to watch that performance.
Yes.
I'm sure we all have lots of questions. People are posting more questions. We'd welcome more from the audience. Hope you'll continue to post. I wanted just to ask a point that I missed. I love this idea of pairing Mary with Mrs. Smith, and just in general, your whole conversation about opposites, the sparkling opposites. I love that. But I missed who Nurse Rooke paired with. Can you say that again? And maybe
it was Lady Russell.
Yes.
Lady Russell. Okay. You want to tell us a little bit about that? What you had in mind?
Well, just because I think Lady Russell is a little underdeveloped in the novel, and in my play, I open her up quite a bit. And she's privileged. She's got it all. She's of the old generation, of the old world, and I think this novel is showing us what the new world could look like with a Nurse Rooke, with a Jane Austen who's making her own money and writing under her own name. Not until she's dead, but that I think that's what Jane Austen was looking at, and so I thought that was a really interesting kind of pairing, as it were. Gave the actor lots to work with.
Well, you also have to pair characters who are not in a scene together.
That's the other challenge. Thank you for noticing that. So you have to really be careful. And there are a couple of places where it's touch and go, and I had to be told by the dramaturg. And I had never written a play, a period play like this, which requires so much elaborate costume. And she said to me, Catherine, you have to allow for costume changes. and that's something it's something that's new for me. So I had to add quite a few little transitions to allow for that. And so yes, make sure that they don't appear in the same scene. Yes.
That was actually another, I was going to ask is how, with those pairings, did you just have like one or two elements that would, well, I guess you weren't in charge of the costuming, but.
Well, we haven't gotten to that point yet, right? So okay. The beautiful thing about doing this play first at Concordia University of Edmonton in the fall is that because we have a large pool of actors to work with, right? Because they are students, we might not have to do this this kind of arrangement that I've got up there on the board here, and we may be able to have everyone take a part, rather than. But when we get to a professional stage, this will be part of the challenge for the design team and for the actors. Yeah.
But I really love the idea of the doubling, because I noticed, I didn't get to kind of focus on all of them, but I noticed you also had Sir Walter and Admiral Croft being doubled. And I just thought that is genius. Yeah.
It would be so much fun to see how that works. And of course, in the professional reading that I had at the Citadel, I had amazing actors who did just that, and it was so much fun to watch them. Some of them even brought, tiny costume bits just to kind of reinforce that. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say something that the only time I am bothered in this book about Anne is that exact scene when she comes in and she says, I didn't observe anybody in particular. And you feel that for me, it's her only failing. But then, and somebody else pointed about, people didn't recognize servants. But somehow you expect more from Anne.
Yeah,
but I love that you put it in the context that she is wandering in a cloud and she is not seeing anything because of what she experienced the night before. So I love that you redeemed her for me. So thank you.
Although I
We're
think
all-
you also complicate her character
Mhm.
for us. I mean, and this sort of goes, Deb, with what you're saying a little bit. Remember how Austin says that this character is maybe almost too good for me, and
Yes.
yet, I mean, when you pull up all that stuff about how Anne is really ready to discount anything Nurse Rooke says on the basis of ignorance and class. It's really interesting to me that Mrs. Smith, which I hadn't really noticed that much, pushes back and gets us to think about her as my sensible Nurse Rooke. And so, I mean, we're getting a kind of more complicated sense of Anne, too, than we sometimes get.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think, that's the point of all these extra characters that Jane Austen uses.
Mhm.
I don't know if people figured out who I left out.
No, we have several comments.
There's a
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
list. Yes.
They got it. I knew they would. Yes, the two children, Mr. Shepherd, the Dalrymples, the Viscountess and her daughter. Also Charles Hayter, someone found that.
Yes.
And the Musgroves. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's right.
Mrs. Harville.
No, Mrs. Harville's in the play.
Is she?
She's in the
Oh,
play.
she
She's doubled with
Oh yeah, you're right.
Mrs. Croft.
Yes. Okay.
Ah, that's nice. I like that.
So I figured, here's the woman
That's
who
nice.
has been around the world on those ships
Mhm.
and has no children.
Right.
And then the woman who's the sailor's wife who's had the children and
Mhm.
stays home to mind them and guide them. So again, they're almost from two different worlds. And I
Mhm.
just love that.
Who did you double with Bennick?
Mr. Elliot.
Mr. Elliot.
Yes.
Ooh.
So Anne's two other suitors in one person. So I just thought that the actor would have so much fun with that. And the one that we had was brilliant. At the Citadel, yeah.
I hope you can do something with the costumes where you make it just like one prop or something simple
Right.
that needs to change between to show the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot can be done with costume, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Austen herself had this doubling aspect in mind in the creation of her characters?
Well, I wondered. It was just as if she was giving me the gift of this.
Mhm.
I wondered about that when I laid this out.
Yeah, especially the Mary and Mrs. Smith, and somebody pointed this out in the comments about pairing Mary with Mrs. Smith, the hypochondriac with a person really ill and optimistic.
Yeah.
The best opposites there. So
Yeah.
I think she's always defining things oppositionally in that way.
Always is. Yeah, because that is the nature of human life, right?
yeah.
She's just so aware of every corner of an argument. So I've got Mrs. Clay, who is the opportunist, right?
Yeah.
Doubled with Louisa, the firm one.
Yeah.
Right? The one who takes chances.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Somebody
great.
asked about the cob. Do you have the fall from the cob in the play?
Oh, I do.
Yes.
How it's going to happen design-wise is not quite clear yet, but
Maybe that's your spectacle.
well, the spectacle for me is the music all the way through, because you've got that concert. We don't have a ball scene in Persuasion. It's one of the few where the two leads do not dance together, which again I found as sort of a commentary on the new world. not everyone can put on a ball. But a concert is something that more people can participate in.
It's also, I mean, they dance to the past, right? So the kind of actual discovery, standing something that they've already done. So maybe.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you, Inger, very well.
Yeah, you're going in and out,
Oh.
so I don't know if it's me or you, Inga.
Okay.
Are you unstable?
So we can
also?
move on to something else. I think I'm unstable.
Okay. One of the questions that I had, Catherine, was you seem to suggest, and I wrote it down, but now I can't find it in my notes, that you think that Persuasion is not a novel that is in a shape that Jane Austen would have left it in. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Not in the shape. What did I say? Was I talking about the structure? There's books.
Can you hold on a minute? I'm not sure if we can hear you.
Yeah. I don't know where that's coming from.
All right, try it again. We were hearing a lot of background noise.
Static, yeah. I wonder, did you mean when I said that the book, the book is arranged into 2 books of 12 chapters each?
Not just that, but that it seemed to me you thought that Austen might have been going to do something else. Did I misread that? I know that's often a comment, a critical comment on that novel, that if she had lived longer, she would have done more with it before she got it published.
Let it go. Yeah, she actually didn't submit it yet, right? It was still on her shelf, which
Right.
does suggest that she wanted to go back and do more with it. But we do have those canceled chapters,
Yeah.
which tell us that she did find the ending that she wanted. I
She
wonder.
also writes Beanie.
Yeah, I wonder. The fact that she didn't title it as Persuasion is another point that we have to look at. She called it The Elliots. So would she have changed that title? Would she have liked that title? I like that title. Yeah. And I looked at my play and I thought, should I change the title? I have an opportunity here. I could do that.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't find another one.
Right.
It seems to be
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
also recognizable.
Very recognizable.
One of the viewers has a question or a clarification here on what we've talked about.
Yeah, there is dancing in Persuasion, but it's more of in the salon or in the Kellynch Hall. But the 2 leads never do dance together. In fact, he comments on that. Does Miss Anne never dance? Or does she not dance anymore?
Can you hear me now? I might have a kind of take. Okay. I have always had trouble forgiving Mrs. Smith for saying that saying more than I feel like she needed to about how Anne would be happy with Mr. Elliot, including the line that you preserved about how you can be very safe in his character. Just curious how how you were thinking about that in terms of whether Mrs. Smith is justified in that regard or not.
To me, I understand Mrs. Smith just like I understand Charlotte Lucas, that she is desperate and she needs help. So is she going to jump on the man that she thinks is actually engaged to her friend? She can't really do that until she knows, and Anne tells her, I will never marry him. And then she goes on to reveal his real character. but I think she feels very duplicitous. I think she feels uncomfortable about it, and that's why I mentioned that one line, something like, I recommend I can't call him my present friend. He was a former friend, right? So I think she's very aware of what she's, of the harm that she could possibly do.
Yeah.
And that's why at the end of my scene, I have Anne say, so this is why. She says, well, how could you think I could be happy with him? And, she gets all those answers, and she says, well, this is why you said that at the beginning. Then I think there was a real acknowledgement. I think this was a friend kind of confessing, and the friendship actually strengthening with that confession. To me, that is a picture of what a friend can do, and what a friend, how a friend should be receiving and bestowing that constant reciprocity that's going on. And Anne, I think, recognizes that her friend is desperate, and that's why she says, I'll get my friend to help you. I know someone who's been to the West Indies. I've always found that remark just so latent. And how can she do that? But she does. And so
there's also the question of like, why about the West Indies? Because, in Mansfield Park, there's so much discussion about the ties to Antigua, but seldom do people talk about this mention of the West Indies. So what do you think? And Austen generally doesn't add small details for no reason. What do you think that the presumably enslaved people connected ownership that her husband, Mr. Smith, had is meant to do in the novel?
Well, I think it's similar to Mansfield Park. It's there, it's happening. But the difference here is that Mrs. Smith wants nothing of it. She wants to get out of that. She wants to divest herself of that property and then receive the money from it so that she can live and not be outside of society, destitute, without friends, all that. But yes, so Wentworth has to be the one who does that kind of that job. So it's a reality.
Yeah, so this is, a commenter agreeing with, why Mrs. Smith does it. And then also this, which is also true. She discourages Anne from marrying Mr. Elliot. She may lose her friendship with Anne. So that's another concern. Yeah.
It's a really tricky thing. And, people go through this all the time. They have a friend, but the friend marries someone that they maybe don't like that much. What are they going to do? They have to decide. Are they going to become friends with the spouse of the friend or not? And that's what Lady Russell's job is right now, is to take Wentworth as not only a friend, but I think the word used is her other child, actually, in terms of, Anne being her child and Wentworth as her other child. So, but it isn't Lady Russell who gets the end of the book. It's Mrs. Smith.
No, it is Mrs. Smith.
Is there, and she's their first friend to visit them wherever they live. We don't know, which is not important in this novel, is it?
Right.
It's the first novel where the heroine and the hero do not have landed property, and that is another thing many people pointed out.
Well, I came into this, and maybe I still will be when I'm back reading the novel, kind of feeling, as Inga does, that Mrs. Smith is a very problematic figure, and I'm kind of unhappy. But I think your expansion of the scene and the acting really help us see Anne's acceptance of Mrs. Smith's explanation and change through that scene more convincing. I mean, it's really interesting, and it gets at what the difference in some ways between what drama can do, you know, when we see something unfolding with physical bodies in front of us, and what a novel might or might not do if we don't have a narrator who's inserting to tell us all the time how we should feel about something. So it's really kind of a fascinating, you know, difference between genres.
Yes, completely. But Jane Austen, I think, is one author who translates so beautifully to the stage.
Yeah.
You know, and that comes from the orality of the sentences. You know that she has spoken those out loud, you know, in her private family groupings over and over again, and to herself, and maybe just to Cassandra. You can hear that she has rehearsed every sentence.
Also, yes, but I also think that it's partly because of the way that drama influenced her composition. And when I've been reading a lot of her contemporaries, and one of the things that has struck me the most is how what's the word, bloated, or you know, overdrawn with lots of little tangents that you know, the word that kept coming to my mind was economy with Jane Austen, and her the spareness of detail, only including them if they really advance the plot. So I can't help but feel like she gets that from her love of theater.
Yeah.
And also, not only that, but the layering of meaning, even within the text, is unbelievable what she can include. And that's what makes it so accessible, I think, that we all have a way in.
Here's somebody commenting on a modern adaptation. The title is Second Chances, which is a good title.
Another title, if you want to take a slightly darker look, would be Dear Self.
Yes. Dear Self.
Oh, Inga, I had that very same idea.
Really?
I think we're onto something here.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at the modern
self-intrudes.
adaptations, just the period one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other way of thinking about Mrs. Smith and her complex character, and some of the things you pointed out with Anne is that, you know, dear self always intrudes, you know, as she says, and the way that we are all biased, and we have all partial vision, and that partiality can both turn us for the worse, but it can also be what allows us to love, you know, faultless despite all her faults from Emma, but also the little omissions in Wentworth's claims that Anne notices when he his love for her. So I think it's so beautiful the way she uses that partiality in this novel.
Yeah, and what did you think of that idea of Wentworth and his competitive nature?
That's a lovely idea.
Because I really do think, I think when, you know, when he meets Mrs. Smith, he's got to be very grateful for the evidence provided against his rival, Mr. Elliot. Right? And he really knows nothing of Mr. Elliot's character, except that he's always where he doesn't want him to be. He's talking to Anne, he keeps on interrupting, and you see that in the concert scene. But I think that's another kind of dear self moment of Wentworth.
Yes.
He likes to win.
Yes, well, I mean, the whole novel is shaped by his anger and resentment, right? And which brings me to a question I also had. I guess I'm of two minds about your claim where you said that you mentioned several times about Anne's growth. I'm not entirely convinced that she grows or that she needs to. And in fact, it seems to me that the real change and the one who needs to change is Wentworth. But maybe you could say a little more about that.
Well, I think, like, as I see Anne in my play anyway, her job is to show Wentworth who she is. And I know we're running out of time here. Yeah. And that means she's got to uncover parts of herself she has not shown before. And I think that is a form of growth. And I think even in the Mrs. Smith scene, there is some growth. She forgives Mrs. Smith for the sort of tongue slipping, for what she says about Mr. Elliot, because she understands that her friend is in dire need. And instead of blaming her, she's going to help her. So I think that's Anne's nature, to help. But yeah, that would be another whole thing to look at.
Yeah. Well, thank
Well,
you.
I think, doesn't she grow because she becomes much more assertive? I mean, that's the arc you see with Anne, becoming much more able to act out what she feels, and her speech to Harville.
That's what that also is what I think, that Anne, because of Mrs. Smith, comes away with this feeling of constancy and openness, and also knowing what she knows about Mr. Elliot. She has to act. This is she has to do something. And so she's going to tell her story. And so when she speaks about her sex, she's talking not only about herself, but she's talking about people like Mrs. Smith and the late Mrs. Elliot, who loved Mr. Elliot to her death. She's talking about Fanny Harville. We've seen lots of examples by then. And I think it just sort of, Mrs. Smith kind of is a catalyst for that reveal at the end.
Well, I wish we could all come to see your play.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
We should probably end with this comment, because this is what I'm so appreciative of you giving Mrs. Smith her just due. But it's easy to remember the adaptation's portrayal and forget how she was in full in the novel. And so grateful to you for giving her a voice in your work. Because why has she not been in so many of the other adaptations? She's really such an important character.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's I think it's because the other adaptations were written by men, personally. But anyway, I'll just say.
Right. Okay.
The pen has been in their hands.
The pen has been in their hands.
The microphone has been in their hands. Put this up here.
So I think we should wrap up, Inga.
Yes, please. Yeah? It's your line.
Okay. So thank you so much, Katherine, and thank you to everybody in our audience. We want to invite you back on April 22nd for our next presentation. What do 18th century charity campaigns, Charlotte Lucas, and today's Jane Austen legacy industry have in common? More than you might think. In a few weeks, Dan Mangiavellano explores one of Austen's most controversial minor characters, as well as the state of today's arts and culture philanthropic landscape, discovering why donor support of the Austen legacy industry is more important than ever. So hopefully you can join us for that.
Yes. And on that note, please consider supporting our nonprofit, the Jane Austen Collaborative, which strives to connect public audiences to the works of Jane Austen in so many different facets, virtually, as we are here with Jane Austen and Company and Jane Austen's Desk, and in person with our flagship Jane Austen Summer Program. Please check out our website and enjoy all the content and all the Austen fandom. We've enjoyed bringing you this
we are still mastering the art of the ask.
Yes.
But we look forward to seeing everyone next time. And thank you again, Katherine, for a delightful talk. And those of you still in the audience, do please consider donating. The donations are absolutely crucial for our ability to offer this programming for free to those who cannot afford it otherwise. Every contribution helps us continue to provide new Austen-related content. So see you all in 3 weeks.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
you.
everyone.